He's the kind of guy you can't look away from. A little battered, a little stubborn, carrying more baggage than he'd ever admit to. And somehow the audience never stops pulling for him, mistake after mistake. That's not a trick of writing. That's a foundation. At 81 years old, Tom Selleck has finally put into plain words something his fans have quietly suspected for years. Underneath the mustache, the easy grin, and all those trademark silences, there's a friendship with Sam Elliott that runs far deeper than co-star small talk. Two men who landed in Hollywood at nearly the same moment, competed for the same kind of parts, and somehow turned that rivalry into a bond forged over campfires, saddle sores, and paperback westerns. So what is Selleck really saying about Elliott now, at this point in both their lives? What actually came out of his mouth? And why does it matter so much? The story underneath is more touching than most people would guess. A friendship that started almost by accident. There's something almost too neat about how Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott's paths first crossed, like a studio executive dreamed it up on purpose. Two tall men with matching mustaches, both drawn toward dusty landscapes and horseback stories, both still trying to find their footing in an industry that hadn't decided what to make of either of them yet. By most accounts, the two of them first appeared on screen together all the way back in 1968, sharing an episode of the Western series Lancer, years before anyone outside a casting office knew their names. At the time, they were simply two more faces in a very crowded business. Thomas William Selleck came into the world on January 29, 1945, in Detroit, Michigan, raised by a homemaker mother and a father who worked in real estate. When the family moved to Sherman Oaks, California, it quietly reshaped the direction of his entire life. He finished high school at Grant High in 1962 and headed to the University of Southern California on a basketball scholarship, studying business with zero intention of ever stepping on a stage. By his own telling, he wandered into an acting class at a community college purely because he needed an easy credit, and that decision rerouted everything. He studied under Coach Milton Katsilas at the Beverly Hills Playhouse and started landing bit parts on television in the late 60s, showing up in programs like Judd for the Defense and Bracken's World. His first film role came in 1970, in the eccentric Mae West picture Myra Breckinridge, an unlikely launch pad for an actor who would eventually become synonymous with steady, square-jawed decency. Sam Elliott's road into the business ran on a different track, but moved with a similar patience. He was born August 9, 1944, in Sacramento, California, though he grew up mostly in Portland, Oregon, after his family relocated when he was 13. His father worked for the Department of the Interior. His mother taught school. Elliott studied at the University of Oregon and later Clark College before fully committing to acting. In 1969, he landed a small, largely forgettable role as a card player in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, a film that did little for his resume at the time, but put him in the orbit of major Hollywood productions. He spent years afterward working steadily in smaller parts, sharpening a screen presence built on an unmistakable baritone and a face that looked like it belonged to an older American story. Hollywood kept underestimating him. He kept showing up anyway. The real cement of the Selleck-Elliott friendship wasn't a single handshake. It was a shared project that landed at exactly the right time. In 1979, both actors headlined The Sackets, an NBC miniseries adapted from two Louis L'Amour novels, The Daybreakers and Sackett. Selleck, Elliott, and Jeff Osterhage played three brothers pushing west out of Tennessee after tragedy struck their family. Weeks of long days on horseback, playing siblings on camera, built something that outlasted the shoot itself. The Sackets was never a ratings juggernaut, but it did something more lasting than a hit show usually manages. It forged a real friendship between two men who might otherwise have simply crossed paths and moved on. Neither of them wanted to let that chemistry go to waste. 3 years later, in 1982, Selleck, Elliott, and Osterhage reunited for The Shadow Riders on CBS, another L'Amour adaptation. This time about two brothers on opposite sides of the Civil War who reunite to rescue kidnapped family members from a band of raiders. Directed by veteran Western filmmaker Andrew V. McLaglen, the film paired Selleck as Mac Traven and Elliott as Dal Traven, with Catherine Ross rounding out the cast as Kate Connery, a role that, unbeknownst to anyone on set, would later connect to Elliott's own life in an unexpected way. By the time The Shadow Riders aired that September, Selleck was already a massive star. Magnum, P.I. had premiered on CBS in December 1980 and turned him into appointment viewing. That he chose to spend his precious time going back to the Western genre, with Elliott specifically, says plenty about where his priorities actually sat. When success pulled them apart, a friendship built on years of shared trail thus might have looked, on paper, like a simple story. Two men who bonded early and stayed close forever after. Hollywood rarely lets things stay that tidy, though, and the years following their Western collaborations pushed Selleck and Elliott down very different roads, testing whether what they'd built could survive distance and wildly uneven fame. Selleck's career took off almost immediately. Magnum, P.I. turned into a certified phenomenon, and by 1985, he was reportedly earning around $500,000 an episode, a number that would translate to well over $1 million per episode in today's money. He picked up a Golden Globe for the role, was nominated for 5 Emmys, and won one in 1985. Then came Three Men and a Baby in 1987, the top-grossing film of that year. For a stretch, Selleck was about as famous as an American actor could get, and he said more than once that the whole thing felt accidental. He never set out to chase stardom. He just wanted dependable work. Elliott's climb during those same years looked nothing like Selleck's. He kept building a reputation as one of the most dependable character actors working in film and television, but the ascent was slower and quieter. He appeared in Mask in 1985, Roadhouse in 1989, and Tombstone in 1993, playing Virgil Earp opposite Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, each performance adding another layer to a persona that was becoming unmistakable. But the leading man opportunities on Magnum scale never quite arrived for him. He stayed busy, stayed respected, and operated in a lane that ran parallel to Selleck's without ever fully merging with it. Even with that gap in public visibility, the friendship never cracked. What held it together, from everything available, wasn't a shared calendar, it was shared values. Both men have talked over the years about preferring real connection to social theater. Neither built a reputation on party circuits or strategic celebrity friendships. Selleck bought a 63-acre ranch in Ventura County in 1988 for roughly $5 million and has said many times that he'd take ranch life over a red carpet without hesitation. Elliott, who split time between homes in Malibu and Oregon's Willamette Valley with his wife, actress Catherine Ross, his former Shadow Riders co-star whom he married in 1984 after years of an on-and-off relationship, kept a similarly low profile away from the industry's louder corners. Neither man needed public appearances together to keep the friendship alive. It ran on something sturdier than visibility. Selleck has talked about this openly, describing Elliott as someone with a kind of integrity that's gotten harder to find in the business. That's not admiration that fades just because two schedules stop lining up. The 1990s pushed both men into new chapters. Selleck wrapped Magnum, P.I. in 1988, walking away from a still popular show by choice, then moved into film before eventually circling back to television. His run as Dr. Richard Burke on Friends in the mid-90s, 10 episodes total, introduced him to a completely different generation and became one of the more talked-about recurring arcs in the show's run. Elliott, meanwhile, kept stacking his resume with Tombstone, Gettysburg, and a growing side career as one of the most recognizable narrating voices in America, lending that baritone to commercials, documentaries, and audiobooks. Their careers kept getting mentioned in the same breath industry-wide, even during years when they barely crossed paths in person. Looking back at that stretch, what stands out is that the friendship never depended on constant contact. It survived on something closer to mutual recognition. Men who've ridden together through desert heat and worked through demanding material side by side tend to form a bond like that, one that doesn't need a weekly phone call to stay intact. It runs on what was already built, what 1883, Blue Bloods, and A Hard Year revealed about the real friendship. If the earlier decades built the foundation between Tom Selleck and Sam Elliott, the stretch from 2023 through 2025 is what actually tested it and proved it was real. Both men were still working well into their 70s and 80s, itself a small statement about the kind of actors they turned out to be. But when a few things converged at once, what came out of it was a portrait of genuine care that went well past professional respect. Sam Elliott took on the role of Shea Brennan in 1883, Taylor Sheridan's Yellowstone prequel, a part that put him in front of an enormous new audience and earned him a Screen Actors Guild Award for Best Actor in a Television Movie or Limited Series at the 2023 ceremony. In his acceptance speech, Elliott called it the most meaningful recognition of his 55-year career and thanked his 1883 castmates and Sheridan directly for giving him a role that let him do some of the finest work of his life. It silenced any lingering idea that Elliott was just a reliable supporting player. He was the emotional center of a massive show, and the industry took notice. So did Selleck. In a candid conversation with Parade in December 2024, right as Blue Bloods was closing out its 14-season run on CBS, Selleck was asked whether he'd ever consider working on a Taylor Sheridan project with his old friend. He didn't hesitate. He said Sam was great in 1883, that Sam's always great, that they go way, way back, that he loves him dearly, and that he'd jump at the chance to work with him. That wasn't a rehearsed promotional line. It was a man saying exactly what he meant. Blue Bloods ending hit Selleck harder than a lot of people expected. He'd played Commissioner Frank Reagan for 14 seasons, reportedly earning around $200,000 an episode in the later years, across 275 total episodes, with the series finale airing December 13, 2024. He'd anchored that fictional family's dinner table for over a decade, and losing that daily structure showed up in visible ways. Through 2025, reports surfaced that he'd put on weight, pulled back from his usual routines, and was struggling to adjust to life without the show. That's when Sam Elliott stepped in and showed exactly what the friendship was made of. People close to both men described Elliott as genuinely alarmed by what he was seeing and determined to pull his old friend out of it. Elliott has talked in his own interviews about the particular misery of waiting by the phone in this industry, and he used that understanding to reach out, reportedly floating the idea of hitting the gym together or just spending time talking, whatever it took to get Selleck out of a rough patch and pass along some tips for a healthier routine. That gesture is the kind of thing that can't be staged. Elliott wasn't doing it for headlines or goodwill. He did it because a friend was struggling, and that was reason enough. The bond that started on a television set in 1968 and deepened over saddle-sore weeks on a 1979 miniseries was still very much alive, still capable of producing a phone call that essentially said, "I see what's happening, and I'm not going anywhere." That's rarer than people tend to assume, especially in a business that trains people to be calculating about almost everything, including who they care about. Selleck did eventually find solid ground again. His wife, Jilly Mack, reportedly played a big part in nudging him back toward healthier habits, and a mix of personal support and new professional prospects helped bring him back. Talk of a possible Jesse Stone revival and a Blue Blood spinoff kept his creative gears turning. But Elliott reaching out the way he did stands on its own as proof of what Selleck has been saying publicly for years, that this friendship was never a career convenience. It's a personal truth that happened to survive Hollywood. What Selleck actually feels at 81. At 81, Tom Selleck has reached a point of real clarity about what matters to him and who's been there through all of it. His 2024 memoir, You Never Know, published by HarperCollins and co-written with Ellis Hennigan, offers the most direct look into his personal life he's ever given readers. Alongside tributes to Frank Sinatra, Carol Burnett, and his mentor James Garner of the Rockford Files, Selleck writes about Elliott with a specific kind of warmth, describing him plainly as a lanky guy with a deep voice who always knew exactly what he wanted and who he was. That's not a throwaway line in a book built to present Selleck on his own terms. Elliott takes up real space in it. What Selleck expresses about Elliott, in the book and in interviews tied to its release, goes past the kind of polite mutual praise that longtime colleagues usually trade for the cameras. There's specificity to it. Selleck points to Elliott's consistency, his refusal to cut corners, his instinct to chase serious work over the biggest paycheck available. Those are qualities Selleck clearly recognizes in his own choices too, and naming them in Elliott reads almost like self-recognition, like looking across a fire and seeing someone who made the same call for the same reasons. The two men occupy an interesting spot in the history of American masculinity on screen. Both built stardom partly on physical presence, that particular mix of height, stillness, and unhurried confidence that reads as real instead of performed. But both were also careful about what they let that image represent. Neither chased villain roles for shock value. Neither reinvented themselves just to stay relevant. They built careers on flawed but decent characters, and audiences kept responding to that for decades in a way that manufactured, shock-driven fame never manages to sustain. Selleck's feelings about Elliott also say something about how both men have handled getting older in this business. Elliott's work in 1883, and later in the 2017 film The Hero, where he played an aging Western star confronting a cancer diagnosis, reminded the industry that certain actors only get more compelling with time, that a face carrying decades of lived experience communicates things a younger face simply can't fake. Selleck has said he wants that for himself too, wants to keep working roles that use everything he's accumulated instead of hiding it. His stated interest in working with Taylor Sheridan, framed explicitly around reuniting with Elliott, suggests he sees his old friend as a working model for aging in this business with dignity intact. It's also worth noticing what Selleck hasn't done over the years. He hasn't built some elaborate mythology around the friendship. He hasn't gone vague or dodgy when asked about Elliott directly. The language has stayed plain and personal. Saying he loves him dearly isn't complicated. It's a straightforward statement from a man who's spent enough decades in this industry to know precisely what he's saying and why he's saying it. He's earned the right to keep it simple, and the simplicity is sort of the whole point. At 81, with Blue Bloods behind him and whatever comes next still unwritten, Selleck's feelings about Sam Elliott add up to something bigger than a nice story about two mustachioed Western guys who stayed close. It's a philosophy about what actually lasts in a life spent performing. Not the performances, but the people who were around before the cameras rolled and stuck around after they stopped. Looking back across the accidental acting class, Magnum, P.I., and 14 years as Frank Reagan, the through line was never really the roles. It's the people, and Sam Elliott sits near the very top of that list. As of 2026, Tom Selleck's net worth is estimated at roughly $45 million, built across 5 decades of film, television, producing, and real estate. Sam Elliott's is estimated around $20 million, the product of steady, deliberate work in film, television, and a long career lending his voice to narration. Both men are still working. Both are still, unmistakably, icons. And if Selleck gets his wish and Taylor Sheridan finds a way to put the two of them in the same frame again, audiences will get to watch two men who never stop being exactly who they are, not because the industry demanded it, but because they decided a long time ago that it mattered more than anything else on the table. If this look at the friendship between two of Hollywood's most enduring names was worth your time, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop a comment and let us know which Selleck or Elliott role stuck with you the most. Do you think we'll ever actually see them share a screen again? And if you want more stories about the friendships behind Hollywood's biggest names, the next video is right here waiting for you. See you there.